Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Jordan and I talked about biblical literacy today. He is going over that and a couple other things in this sermon series that he's doing, so it was very topical, and I thought we got really into it. I enjoyed it, so I hope you guys did too. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.
Nice.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the best podcast recorded in this building. With me, as always, is Jordan Weaver.
It was best podcast a minute ago, and he thought we were live. And
I know.
Then he downgraded
Levi counted us down, and he was like 3, 2, 1, go. And then I started, and then he's like, "No, wait, I didn't actually press the live button." So
I have an apology that I need to issue. Last night I was on my phone, and I see this tab, and it says invite all of your friends to Shiloh Ranch. So if you're finding the Shiloh Ranch podcast right now because I invited you to like the page, it was literally click this button and you'll invite 2,000 of your friends that don't like it. Whoa. So I clicked it and it did it, and then it comes back and it goes click the remaining 600 or whatever. So we sent it. I literally I did it and I was like,
yeah,
that's probably not very nice.
Yeah, it's like those games that Jason's trying to get us to play to win gems. It's a whole thing. So the topic today.
Jason said he's addicted to those. You know those on Sunday it pops up your screen time for the week.
Yes.
He said those games have really upped up his screen time to an average of now 12 minutes a day because he never has his phone with him ever.
Yeah.
Jason's the only person that when you call instead of text, he's like, "What?"
The topic today is biblical literacy. Have you heard of it?
Yes. It's something I'm hovering around right now.
Yeah,
actually.
in your recent sermons, you have mentioned biblical literacy.
Yes.
Could you expand upon just what that means, first off?
I was talking to somebody today. I talked about a friend that I used to have, and I've talked about it a lot. He was illiterate, completely illiterate, could not read, couldn't write, couldn't sign his own name. And yet, he would sit in Bible studies, and the depth of who he understood Jesus to be, based on what he'd learned in his life. He was a recovering addict. He'd spent part of his life living in a chicken coop. I mean, this guy had been through some stuff, right? And I feel like that he was, in those groups, he was one of the most biblically literate people that I knew, and for his experience level.
Right.
And then there's other people who, they're scholars and they can read, and yet they look at the word and it's just, they're not literate to what they're reading. And so I felt really challenged, and I'm not sure how far into this we want to go, but I felt really challenged to address spiritual slavery, and what I mean by that is, if we're not careful, gosh, how deep into this do we want to go?
Really deep.
Here's
That's
the
entire point.
Here's the background. I just walked in literally 3 minutes ago. I've been gone all day. I came sprinting in, so I'm still sort of in I was just at the gas station. But in 1740, they passed a law in South Carolina. They said the slaves were getting too aggressive and they were starting to unite. And they saw that as a problem to their way of life, right? The plantation's way of life. So they would put in systems that would keep slaves from feeling empowered. And if you look at those, one of the main aggressive tactics was they cannot become literate. It became illegal, actually, to educate someone who was a slave.
Okay.
Regardless of color, specifically. But anybody who was in a position of slavery was not allowed to be educated because an education was too empowering. Okay. So then if you look at a church, if we're not careful, I think what I have seen happen, not commonly, but what does happen is sometimes I feel like maybe the pastors can feel a little bit threatened by well, why do you need me if you can do it yourself? And my point is I feel really challenged to put the Bible in a way that people can understand, not the words they're reading, but the Jesus they're being taught about. That's one of our goals, is that we want to be led biblically. We want to lead biblically from the pulpit and the sermons and stuff, but we also want people in their own lives to know the Bible well enough that is their true north for their compass in life, in their day-to-day life. I want to read you a story. Ask what you're about to ask. I'm going to look at a verse real quick.
Well, I didn't think of pastors maybe not encouraging biblical literacy because they want to be the one to give you the information. And that makes, that's a human thing. That makes sense. Meaning if you have a talent in something, if you're an amazing carpenter or something, and then everybody learns carpentry, the value of your position diminishes.
And that's
hard.
And that's the scarcity mindset that says there's only enough for half of us.
Right.
I mean, we teach kids how to think this way when we play musical chairs, right? Like whatever it takes, you have to get a seat and somebody else is going to be left out in the cold. And that's the whole concept of what God teaches us is you can never empower people in such a way that's harmful to yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, think like today we went chucker hunting with Thad Buchanan and Thad, if somebody wants to love me and show me how much they care for me, nothing matters more to me than when people take care of my kids.
Interesting.
Like when someone loves my children, I feel personally connected to that. People, I'm not really in a position to always accept kindness from everyone. I'm not around. But when people love my kids, and I think sometimes that God's going, just love my kids, empower my children, empower my people to know who I am. Why would God allow that to be a negative?
Interesting.
Hold on, I got to catch up on watching from AZ. Jack, we're in AZ and how long are you going to be there? I have a reason for asking.
Also, how hot is it?
Yeah.
I'm just personally curious.
I have a hard time understanding and following my Bible readings and saying that I have to have our pastor and teachers educate me. Pastors are very valuable. Marcia, that is kind of the idea, I think, is that I'm there as a supplement. I'm there as a supplement so that when you hear a story, you understand the depth of it, and the next time you look through it, you're better equipped. So I'm not downplaying the role that I carry. I'm saying it's there to be sort of a propellant or a catalyst for something that God wants to do in your life. I can't be the source to all however many tens of people part of Shiloh Ranch. Yeah. I can't be their source of everything good, and they're just out in the cold to survive for the rest of the week. Yeah. When I say biblical literacy, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. This is Jesus. And it says, leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out loud, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly. When I say biblically literate, this is the best example I know of. This is when I say understanding the Jesus that the Bible talks about, this is exactly what I'm talking about right here. It says, Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, send her away, for she keeps crying out after us. Keep in mind, she's a Canaanite. She's not an Israelite. She's not one of the chosen people. She's not of the elevated stature. And it says that she's asking a favor of Jesus, and Jesus ignores her.
Yeah, that's weird.
Okay. And it says, he said, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. Keep going.
Okay.
The woman came and knelt before him and said, Lord, help me. He replied, it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs.
Yeah, that sounds just on a surface level.
I love this so much because this is where biblical literacy becomes so important, because people who want to decry the validity of the Bible or the compassionate nature of Jesus, that would be a verse they would go to. Like, it's not right to throw the scraps from the table to the dogs before you feed the children. Like, do you realize what he's saying? Like, you are less than human.
Yeah.
And
That's completely opposite of what? Yeah.
But what you find, and this is my best example, this will set up the conversation. What you find is that Jesus is speaking to her according to the law of the day.
Okay.
And he says that, and she says this. And now understand, what we're trying to get is a literate understanding of the nature of Jesus, so that when we go to the Word and we see things like that, we know him well enough that we go, that can't be right. There's got to be something more to that. I honestly believe when he says it to her, this is my opinion, and watch how it plays out. See if my way doesn't make more sense. I think he says it to her with like a glint in his eye, almost a smile of like, the law says that you're not even human. You know that, right? Like according to the law that brings death, the law that Jesus was constantly saying you can't fulfill. She says, yes, it is, Lord. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. So she shoots right back. So if he was saying you're subhuman, she wasn't even supposed to be talking to him.
Right.
She wasn't not only was she not supposed to be talking to him, he was never supposed to even reference that she was alive.
Right.
And then when he says something so inflammatory, he said it in such a way that she felt confident to come back and push through the law and go beyond the law.
Yeah.
It's not right for me to talk to you. She goes, yes, it is. What she's saying, she's going, I know what the law says, but there's something about you that I trust. And then Jesus said to her, woman, you have great faith. This is a woman that's not even part of the tribe. Your request is granted, and her daughter was healed. When I say literacy, I mean an understanding of the Word and of Jesus, that when he says something or brings us through something that we don't grasp or understand, we can go, there's more. There's something else going on. There's something else here. There's something that I don't understand. Because why? I know Jesus. I know him. And I know this is not how he deals with people. So what am I missing?
So is it important to like understand the culture and the time in which it was written?
To some degree, it matters to know all of it. I mean, Marsha, I want to go back to what you said. Hello from Crowley, also SVCC. Hello, Kristen Cassidy. Going back to what you said about it's hard, I have a hard time understanding in the Bible. My favorite thing is to find something that I don't understand in the Bible and then burrow down in it and Google it. Just start digging until you have an answer that reflects an accurate view of Jesus. Because without an accurate view of Jesus, you would go, well, he only loves some people.
Yeah.
He only loves some people because why would he ever say that to the woman? But then you go, okay, well, if that was true, why did he heal her daughter? It wasn't that he was segregating her. He was actually, by even speaking to her, elevating her beyond her legal position. So when I say an accurate God concept, what I mean is a God of love, a God that has leaned in to full forgiveness of people. That was his plan. His plan was to forgive us. And so when you read something that seems to go against that, to dig down and continue digging until you find who Jesus is at the bottom layer of every story. So when I say biblical literacy, I'm so challenged that people would, here's what I like. I like that now we've been at this long enough that people will come to me and go, hey, so-and-so said such and such, and it didn't sit well. I love that because what they're saying is it goes against my literacy of the Bible. And maybe they can't, in that moment, they can't fully express why or how, but they're like, it would be like this. It would be like if somebody goes, hey, Jacob just said that he doesn't like you. I'd be like, no. I might get, I could believe you if you said I get on his nerves sometimes or I drive him crazy or whatever, but because of our personal relationship, there's some things that are just set in stone. And I try to be so consistent in who I feel called to be that people know, yeah, that kind of sounds like him, or no, it doesn't sound like him. I don't want to just be off the rails because that's when you lose everyone's trust. But we understand literacy amongst ourselves. I'm saying that kind of literacy even towards Jesus.
Yeah. So it's almost like a deeper relationship is almost biblical literacy to go as far as you saying, if somebody said Jacob doesn't like you, you just knowing right off the bat that doesn't add up. So it's a relationship thing and also studying the Bible so much so to build that relationship.
5 points to that question. 5 points. The nature of the enemy is temptation, and he tempts you with, you deserve this. I'm trying to sell you something, and then do this for me because I gave you what you asked for. Do this for me, and then if you don't, it's a request and then a demand. It's kindness, a request, a demand. You owe it to me, and then it's a threat. And if you don't, hold on. Excuse me. This is a good point. I don't want to sneeze all the way through.
It's smoky still.
Okay, it's kindness, an request, a demand, a threat, and then death.
Okay.
If you don't, I'll kill you.
Whoa.
And you go, yeah, that sounds like the enemy. That sounds like people. Like, well, I did this nice thing for you. You better do it. If you don't do it, and then death of the relationship. Like the 5 points of how the manipulation works. But then we go, wait a minute. We think of God as like, I gave you Jesus. Here's what I'm asking. Actually, I'm demanding morality. I'm demanding that you be good. And if you're not, I'll throw you in hell. And then when you die, it's eternal. It's death. And we go, wait. See what we just did?
Yeah.
Without a literacy of God's nature, we assign the same nature to God as the enemy. Like we paint God with this enemy color paint. And it's like, it is so vitally important that we understand that God is like pursuit, relent. There will be, it's a Timothy Keller quote, of course, that says there will be nobody in hell who didn't choose it.
Interesting.
Because it's like pursue, and finally relent. That's the nature of God. And I just get so frustrated because so many people paint God in the lens of fear. And you can go to the Bible and find that concept. It's not as backed up as the God of love.
Right.
But if you want to go find a verse out of context, a God of demands and fear and threats and manipulation, you can use the word, but it has to be twisted according to his personality.
Yeah. Interesting. So if we're talking about biblical literacy, I want to talk about like methods because this is study, so what are your methods to studying the Bible? Like, do you kind of, if it was schooling kind of deal, How do you do it?
I'll be 38 next month. And that means I've been in church for 38 years and 9 months.
Okay. Wow.
And so I have a familiarity with the word. Like there's nowhere in the Bible that I can open to that I don't have a general sense of what I'm getting into. And yet I read stuff all the time and I'm like, what?
So, yeah.
Because the deeper I understand Jesus, my perspective changes and I'm seeing it from a different angle. I'm in the middle of a podcast right now taught by a teacher that's not a believer, but he's going through the Bible. And it's a perspective I've never seen because based on the fact that he sees it from a non-believer standpoint, expresses another way of looking at the exact same story. And things like that I really like. And then if I find a specific topic, I'll go read commentaries. And this is for anybody talking about biblical literacy. Right. If you ever read something you don't understand, look up that verse with commentary or explanation. There is so much online. There's so much access to information that like my grandpa didn't have, that my dad didn't have till much later. And I don't want to keep that secret. Like, no, this is why I'm so smart about the Bible. I'm just like, it's there. Like take it. Like when you find a question, dig down, but make sure that when you get there, it's a God of love that you settle on. Because if it's anything that's fear-inducing, you got to understand, like, that is where the literacy of the God concept makes or breaks the information. Huh. Yeah. I just looked up literacy in the dictionary, and the definition of the word is understanding what wasn't included. So you can know the words of the story, but the understanding of the story and the proper interpretation, to me, is so important. So literacy is an interesting term. Keto, there's a author named David Hume, and David Hume said, you cannot derive an ought from an is. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
You cannot derive an ought from an is. Everybody has the Bible, and that would be the is.
Okay.
But when we talk a relational sense, it says the things in the word that are spiritually understood, meaning like it is a relationship with God that helps us derive an ought from what we know is.
Okay.
And so you read something and you go, well, then what do I do with that? You know, when you think about it and you meditate on it and you kind of like question it and you go back and forth. And God named his children Israel, which is wrestles with God. That's part of this process is to wrestle and go, I don't like that, or because maybe sometimes you go, this is a God of love and this is what God has said, and I don't align to that, so it's up to me. I need to change.
Yeah.
But what's so crazy is I almost think that the American church has gotten too lazy because they're like, I don't get it. Oh well.
Yeah.
Of all the things to dig into, of all the questions, of all the things that you could want to know, what could you possibly want to know more than what's in the word, and what does it tell us about who Jesus is? Why would Jesus look at somebody and go, it's not right that I feed the dogs before the children? Don't you know someone has read that and gone, I guess God's just kind of a jerk sometimes.
Do you have a routine? Like for me, it doesn't work. It's not happened like this yet. But the idea of, waking up, the old guy reading the Bible kind of thing, you wake up and you like have your coffee while you read the Bible every morning, that kind of thing. I want to get to that. Yeah. And I've tried it multiple times. It just hasn't stuck because, waking up is
because you're not 70 years old.
Because waking up is difficult when you don't want to. But do you have any kind of routine where you because I guess where I'm getting at is I have to almost like force myself to study. It's whether that's the Bible, whether that's school. I'm just not a person. I mean, I'm frantically curious.
Yeah.
About everything.
Frantically curious. That's a good way to say it.
So I'll be on YouTube and I'll see a video about the pyramids, like we talked about that one time.
And all of a sudden you're just lost for 4 hours.
And all of a sudden I come out of there and I'm like, I know exactly what happened. And
solved it.
So I figured it out, guys.
It's all crystals. Yeah.
But some things so when I do catch, like if I catch something in the Bible that I don't know, the curiosity kicks in and it's like I don't have to force myself. I just want to figure it out.
Right.
But do you find yourself having to almost put in a routine to do that?
You know what I hope? I hope this answer helps somebody, because for years it was hard for me to look at a book and read it and get something out of it.
Yeah.
It was so hard. When I discovered podcasts or audiobooks, like when I can put my headphones in and still continue with because I'm a busy person.
Right.
Like I don't sit still super well.
Right.
I'll get better, but I'm still not very good at it. But if I can put my headphones on, well, then the pursuit becomes, where do I get new information? How do I find more information? Where do I go get more into? Nothing intrigues me more
Mm-hmm.
than an opposing viewpoint.
Interesting.
I like listening to people who help clarify what I believe.
Sure.
You know, that it's like the economy of words, that how to express what we believe. Nothing is more intriguing to me than people who go, you're wrong and here's why. Because in that, I want to know. I want to know what the opposing side looks like, because like when I'm communicating, I want the ability to express both sides and go, but this is why I'm convinced of this. Because if I'm talking to somebody that holds an opposing viewpoint and I don't understand their viewpoint, it's so easy to dismiss. You know, you gain someone's trust when you go, no, I've invested time to understand that viewpoint.
Right.
I want to know. And what I love is when I run across something that actually challenges what I believe and makes me go, oh, whoa.
Right.
Let me give you an example. Biblical literacy. What do we do with carbon dating?
Okay.
You know, there's so much science and they're so confident at the age of the earth, and it seems to go against what the word says. What do you do with that? Because then you're like, oh, you're a science denier. You know, I don't love God, I love science. And you're like, well, if I'm right, then that means God created science, and one doesn't nullify the other, and one validates the other.
Okay.
Joe Pearson one time, and he said it in passing, and I'm not sure, to be honest, that he even recognized the point he was making. He said that God's first miracle was he made something old in an instant. You know, the water into wine, because to make wine, it takes an aging process. And it, like, I'm telling you, like, it hit me like a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
I was like, boom.
I remember.
What if God created an old planet in an instant?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't say he created something brand new and just wiped the dust off of it, and there you go, boys, it's brand new.
Right.
For all we know, God literally, what about this? And all I'm saying is just cognitive dissonance, where I'm at least operating on the willingness to consider both sides.
Right.
What if dinosaurs never actually were a thing? What if God just put them in the rocks as like,
To mess with us.
oh, they're going to hate this?
That would be hilarious.
And I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying, like, I like that train of thinking that says maybe I like both sides of thought too, because maybe there's a deeper understanding of the truth somewhere in there. Robert said, I'm not sure I know anybody that can read the Bible and totally understand unless they have men or people of God to help them interpret. Hello, my friend. Robert, I think that's what I'm hoping is, like, I hope I can be a supplement. You know, there are people that I listen to and it challenges me, because I'm like, they're so much smarter than me.
Right.
And it challenges me to go dig deeper. And I hope that to some degree I'm able to challenge people in a way of like, what else are we doing with our time? Like, if we're not interested in what the word says, what are we doing? And like,
it's kind of the most interesting thing.
yes, it is. And when you listen to somebody that's passionate about anything, it's infectious. And so to have grown up in church, to have gotten bored with the Bible, which is almost a laughable concept, because I'm like, I pretty much know it all. What?
Yeah.
They're like, what about these questions? I'm like, I just don't go to those few questions. And
Yeah.
other than that,
If I don't take in anything more, technically I know it all.
when I was a kid, my dad had a friend staying with us. His truck broke down, so he decided he's going to fix it himself. True story. And he takes it apart, and I'll never forget, he's got the tarp laid out, and he's got pieces everywhere. And you can just see, even as a kid, you can see it on his face. He's kind of like, crap. Okay. And, okay. And he kind of goes to like piecing it back together, and he gets done, and there's extra pieces. And I remember thinking like, I mean, I'm like 12, you know, and it did not run very long, and it blew up.
Yeah.
And my point being, like, that's kind of where I was with the Bible. I'd reached a functioning level of ignorance where I kind of knew what I knew. And so I just operated in only that, but there were spare pieces.
Right.
So now get bored of the Bible, think I know it all, to come back and realize I don't know anything, and I'm just scratching the surface, and I'd made God into a white Republican and all the things that I had done. And now the literacy, it's exactly like you said. Like, I thought to really study the Bible, I had to be old, house slippers, coffee, window, look away, you know, that kind of, like, I don't know how to do it.
Yeah. No, my dad uses the term second bone.
Yes. Explain that, because that is exactly right.
Yeah. No, it's great. My freaking headphones got unplugged. Hold on.
Freaking headphones.
Freaking headphones.
So I'll start the story, and then you you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead.
So
He preached about it, I think, here.
I think he did. Yeah. There was an old farmer that he was mentoring him. And the old farmer says, you just have to keep digging in the Bible till you can find the second bone. And he says, let me explain to you a second bone. He had an old dog that, you know, they would be done eating a steak and toss the dog the bone. And the dog would be so excited he has this brand new bone, and go dig a hole, drop it in there, and bury it halfway. And then he'd go find an old, you know, crappy bone, grab it, put it in there, and then bury it the rest of the way.
The decoy.
And then would sit on the porch. And then a neighbor dog, much younger dog, that he couldn't fight off or anything, would come, smell the fresh bone, dig down, find the first bone, be happy with it, and run off. And then the old dog would still have the fresh bone.
I love it.
So the idea being, if you just keep digging in this scripture, you'll find the second bone.
Right. If you're someone who goes, I can't read the Bible, I don't understand it, there is so much available. You can watch a YouTube video like Ravi Zachariah, R.C. Sproul, Timothy Keller. There's like the modern guys, and I'm not sure if I agree with all their social elements, but like there's the big California churches. Google literally any church, and like it's Bible believing enough that at least starts to formulate what it is that you believe. We are absolutely without excuse. Can you imagine telling somebody who there's a lady that escaped communism, and her name was Margaret. Gosh, I can't remember. But I had lunch with this lady, and she was a concert violinist, and she said when she was a child they had one page of the Bible. One page. That's and right. It was her most valued possession in life. And she would read it, she had it memorized, and she used to tell God, before I die, just let me see a Bible. She had to escape communism. She thought she was going to get shot. She was at a concert and she runs away and she escapes and she comes to the United States. And I just can't imagine telling her, like, I don't really read my Bible. I don't really get it.
Man, we suck.
Like, what? Can you imagine someone who begged God, like, their one wish in life? Yeah. Because their one thing, like, I wish I just had a Bible. Yeah. And we're like, I don't get it.
We have it on our phones.
And plus, the Kardashians is on at 5:30. Oh. What are you doing? I'm TikToking because the Bible's too boring.
It's going to be embarrassing when we get to heaven.
And absolutely.
Then we get there and everybody's like, hey, and we're like, don't look at me.
Your podcast and sermons teach me more than any time I read my part of the Bible. I learn by listening more than reading. I actually do too, Gladys. I literally do. I learn more by listening than reading.
Me too.
But the more I listen, the more I start to understand what's in there. Then when I do go read, because it needs to just be a discipline, when I do go read, I get it more. So it's like a supplement. Like it's breaking through the ice, because eventually you start to read something that's familiar. Mm-hmm. Everybody will understand Proverbs. If this helps, everybody will understand Proverbs. If you go to Proverbs, there's 31 chapters in Proverbs. There's 31 days in the long months. And so if you read a proverb a day, you're at very least starting to understand wisdom principles in the word. Just practical stuff. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's the Gospels, the stories of Jesus. Don't go to the Old Testament at first, because there's like ceremonial law, there's moral law, there's nationality law. I mean, there's three, and I can't remember the other one, but not all laws were forever. Some of the laws were like, hey, when you're in the desert, don't eat this thing. Yeah. Don't touch it. Yeah. And you're like, oh, because it's immoral. No, it has nothing to do with that. It will literally straight up kill you.
Yeah.
And so there are times now that we don't understand the distinction between the laws, and it can get a little hairy because people are like, you ate a pig? I hope that's still worth it when you're in hell. Yeah. You're like, no. There's part of it was just designed to keep them alive. Yeah.
I had a buddy that started reading the Bible. Actually, he got it from here, and it's like the first part of the Bible he ever read. Anyway, so he started reading it, and then he came to me like a week later. He's like, yeah, I got through Genesis.
I killed a sheep. It felt super weird. I'm not sure if I'm cut out for this.
He's like, I don't know really how. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no.
It's not one book.
Don't start there. Yeah.
It's not one book. It's a collection of books.
It's not like a normal book.
I've grown up around folks that consider themselves very biblically literate and religious, but do not consider it to be in any way a relationship. What would you consider this type of biblical literacy without relationship? Deeply confusing. Shameful. I'm just telling you my story, because I would say that for a long time I wasn't relational with God. It was very ceremonial, and I would go to the Bible to try to get it, and I've never felt further from God in my whole life. I felt like God was always mad at me. I always felt like that when I left God, it wasn't because I thought God was bad. It's because I thought I was so bad that he deserved better than me. You know, all these things that we say. Ultimately, it's just defending selfishness. But I would say that without a concept, Abby, of who Jesus is, for me, devastating. I couldn't do it. As the reason I quit living for God when I did. Yeah. And that's what's crazy is even at the time, there was never a time where I would have said, no, I'm not a Christian. I'd be like, yeah, for sure. No, for sure. And I'd quote some scripture that I knew. But otherwise, it's knowing about something. It's not knowing something. It's knowing about something. And the Bible purposefully puts things in there that cause you to dig down deeper to that second bone, like you're saying, that the first glance, it's confusing.
Yeah.
Purposely.
Yeah.
I love when Jesus goes, it's not right that I feed you. I'm glad I was able to read that, because you're like, what?
Yeah. Hey, man.
Are you mean?
Yeah.
Are you in a bad mood? Are you a God that has bad days? Like, why are you sour today?
Right.
And yet, if you were in the room, I fully anticipate, based on that story, that we would watch that in replay, and Jesus is like, according to the law.
Right.
And she's like, no, I know. The law is against me, but I believe you're for me. And Jesus is like, that's the gospel. That's the gospel right there. The law is stacked against you, but I'm for you. And it's that second look. It's those second looks back at things that didn't make sense.
Doesn't Jesus say, for eyes to see and ears to hear, when he's talking about parables?
When he who has eyes to see, let him see. He has ears to hear, let him hear. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's meaning like second bone.
Yeah.
Like he's like, I'm telling this story, but those who really want it will understand it.
We know that our grandma's Bible has the same words in it that we have. We know the Bible has not changed. And yet, you can read it a year apart, and it's a totally different book.
Yeah, right.
And when eyes to hear, ears to hear, eyes to see, I think my understanding of that is when the Bible does all of a sudden open up and make sense. One of the greatest revelations of the Word was why Moses didn't get to go into the Promised Land. I've preached on it. You can look it up. When I understood that what God was doing was demonstrating that law cannot ever do for you what grace did, which is take you to the Promised Land. That the law will never be the thing that crosses you into the calling that God has for your life. That's got to be grace. The law can do a lot of good. It can take you out of slavery and out of captivity, but Moses was the representation of the law, and it can get you right to the edge, but it can't get you in. And when Jesus says, according to the law, you can't get in, he was referencing the life and the story of Moses. When I understood that, the rest of the Bible started to open up. So those revelation moments where you go, I got it, that I'm able to sort of short circuit that for everybody else. Like it's a shortcut. Like, no, this is what it says. And I mean, however many hundreds of people there are that would call this place home, or that even are just kind of tuning in, that's a help for them. So I think that is, I don't know if that answers the question, but that when I say biblical literacy, it's important that I have it.
Right.
Because I'm teaching that God is a God of love.
Right.
And that this system that we're living in is broken and it's flawed, and yet all suffering, I mean, I don't know how scattered to get right here. Philosophers have stopped using suffering as a way to excuse the concept of God. They used to say, how could a God exist if suffering exists?
Okay.
And the reason and this is secular philosophers, the reason that secular philosophers have gotten away from that is they said, well, how can we even prove suffering's bad? Because for suffering to be proven bad or wrong or immoral, you have to prove that human life has value. And the guy that studied this said he went down by the stream because he wanted to observe nature and all of its beauty. And this is the richness of life, is nature. And he said when he watched a praying mantis rip the head off of a bug and eat it, he realized nature is more brutal than humanity.
Yeah.
That the existence of nature does not disprove that people are bad. I mean, it doesn't prove that people are bad. It just is, this is where we're at. And the only way for immorality to even be a thing, or for suffering to even be indicted, would be to give people a value above nature, which is exactly what Jesus did. So philosophers have gone, we're just not going to go down the suffering path anymore, because to prove that suffering is bad, we'd have to prove that God exists, and then we'd have to deal with that. And so it's the whole mess. They don't use suffering as a way to disprove God anymore.
That's interesting.
When you go to nature, it is metal.
Yes, dude. I was about to say that.
Yes, it is.
You follow that Instagram
Yes,
page?
I do. Absolutely. When you see how brutal nature is,
sometimes.
people aren't perfect, but I mean, we're better than nature.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's some stuff on there that I'm like, I feel bad for everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me and a buddy were talking one time about translations of the Bible.
Oh, please go this. Please go there. Please go there.
Because we were, he was saying, his views about, or not his views, but just, I've never thought about it. I was like, well, isn't every translation of the Bible like, okay? And then he's like, well, technically, you get closer to King James and so on like this. And so then it like becomes more authentic or so on like that. And I had honestly never thought of that before.
Right.
So what translations
There are
do you
churches that teaches KJV or nothing. Like
Right.
if it's not King James Version, it is heresy.
Right.
And they believe that. Like they'll staunchly defend it. Separately, we grew up in Keene, and Keene is the center of the Seventh-day Adventists. It's like their hub.
Okay.
And they call themselves Sabbath worshipers. And I'm like, doesn't that seem like an ironic thing? You worship
something
the
other than
Sabbath.
God? Yeah.
And they're like, we're Sabbath worshipers. I'm like, I get it. I know. But they're great people, vegetarians, but there is an aspect that they take super seriously. It's like that's the thing that they take super seriously. And the same way there are people that take the translations of like it's KJV or nothing, but I'm like, dude, it wasn't written in English.
Yeah.
King James is not the original. Jesus didn't speak Old English. It was written in Hebrew, and
Right.
they spoke Greek, and like this is nothing near English.
Right.
So what I like to consider is this. There's a verse in the Bible that says, "Does the faithlessness of man cancel out the faithfulness of God?" That when we are not perfect, does that wipe out God's perfection? And it says certainly not. Mm-hmm. And so what if somebody went to go pin the Bible and they miss a translation, a word here, a word there? Is it going to cost you eternity? Certainly not. Is it, if you do everything else except that one little misprint, right? Mm-hmm. What does that do to your walk? Honestly, if you can complete everything else around those misprints, you're already doing better than the history of mankind.
Right.
And we only argue in the church, about like 3% of the Bible anyway. So my point is, as you start to dig through all these translations, you kind of circulate around the concept and you read it this way. Because one of the verses in Exodus is that the sermon that's coming up on Sunday says that God sought to kill Moses. You're like, well, how could God seek to do something? He's God. Why couldn't he have just done it? You're like, no, you don't understand. Like God's intention was, this is where this is headed unless something changes. So if you read sought to kill him, it would leave you to believe that God was trying and hadn't successfully done it yet.
Right.
You're like, no, that can't be it. That can't be it.
Right.
So then you read it from you see what I mean?
Right.
And so I actually like that there's lots of translations. I like that it kind of tweaks people on the ear. Like, that's not exactly what it says. I'm like, well, let's go dig into it then. Because remember, I like other people's perspectives anyway.
Right.
Let's dig into it and see when this is all said and done, if we can settle on what was actually the point of what was being said.
Have you heard of, my dad brought this up, strong coordinates?
Yes,
The
Strong's Concordance.
Right. Where it's each word has a number, and then you can look up like how many.
My dad calls that his Greek by number Bible. You know, they like paint by number.
by numbers,
That's his Greek by number. You can actually go look at that word and then it also shows you in other places. For instance, this is a fun one. You guys ready for this one? In Genesis, when God calls Eve a helpmate, do you realize the misogyny that's been born out of that one word, helpmate?
Helpmate.
And yet later in that exact same book, God describes himself as our helpmate. And you go, well, maybe it's not a lesser than position. Maybe that word has been confused a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What about this one? Your daughters, if you sell your daughters into slavery, if they're taken advantage of, that you have to marry them, and it's like, see, God was a misogynist. Like, whoa. In the day, the slaves got nothing. Women got nothing, and God is defending the value of women, even at a time where they had none. And so when you go back to the Greek and you start to look through this, there is a wealth of information that we'll miss reading it in English. However, it's still there. I mean, you can Google it. For goodness sakes, we live in 2020. There's no information. We have all the ises available. It's the oughts that we struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy with phones now, and computers and so on. You can literally just click through all the different translations on the same verse.
Have you ever wanted to look for something and you couldn't find it and you almost feel like mad? Like there's something
yeah.
you're and like, how?
Like it's in your head and you're like, what words to search for this?
We're so entitled that when there's something we can't find, we're frustrated. When I was a kid, we had encyclopedias. You want to wrap your mind around how inadequate that is? An encyclopedia. There was people that come to your house and knock on your door and be like, hello, my name's Tim, and today I want to interest you in, do you want to know more? And everyone's like, yeah, of course I want to know more. Like, I have some books that'll do exactly that. And you had to buy like A through D and E through like,
Whoa.
That's in my lifetime.
That's crazy.
And I'm not that old, some might say. And shut up, Jet. And that's my son in the back. And then now look at the information we have available.
Yeah.
My son, who's 11, about to be 12, has grown up in an age where all information is not only available, it's expected.
Right.
To the point that we get frustrated when we can't find something. So, I don't know. The Greek, It's an incredible tool. I mean, it's something that if somebody wants to get to the legitimate bottom of something, it's there.
Do you find yourself doing that
All
sometimes?
the time?
Really?
Yeah, all the time. I love the word hesed is one of my favorite words because it talks about mercy, but it's like a loyalty. It's like an aggressive form of mercy. And when you start digging into hesed, you have to use so many other English words to really get to the base of what that word means. And we just call it mercy. And so we think of it as English mercy. But hesed, when you dig down into it, what you find is there's this whole depth of that word that when you find it, you're like, oh man, how would I have even said this?
Yeah, that was me for the word caretaker for a while.
Yeah, because,
Well, caretaker is like, when you first think of it, it's...
the guy that collects dead people.
Yeah, or the person that's changing bedpans or something.
Right.
But then
the nurse.
But then when you actually look at caretaker and it's like, no, it will aggressively protect the ones it loves and it takes care.
Justice. There's a justice to it.
Yeah, same.
That's the other thing is when you can click on that word and then you can follow the search and you can find other places in the Bible
That
where
it
it's used.
uses it, yeah.
So there are times you look at it and you go, my understanding of that word doesn't make sense in that context. So maybe it means something different than I understood it.
Yeah.
And when I say biblical literacy, this is what I mean.
Right.
There's just a curiosity.
Right.
And I will say there are some people that I don't really understand that are just not curious about really anything. And so I know there will be people who are like, yeah, whatever you say, but they're faithful.
Right.
Like they'll show up to work every single day and they show up early, they stay late. And so I'm not trying to condemn people that are just naturally not very curious. I'm just saying if you naturally want to understand what's in there, it's available. It's right there. And it's never been easier to get a hold of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you can search through all the different translations and then also figure out.
Mindy Nelson said the first book I ever read was Job. That's a rough start. Keto said, there's so much to learn from the word. It takes so much to peel off novice thoughts. And I've read many Bibles and books about the Bible. That's why I listen to different pastors and go to 2 different churches to get perspective. Like Jordan puts new interpretations to help people get to the root of the word, true word of the word. Thank you.
Yeah.
Job is even an interesting one because God, the enemy approaches God and says, I could corrupt Job. You pay too much. That's why Job honors you, is you pay too much. And God literally challenges the devil. And you're like, what? What? Cool whip. But it's all there. I mean, you dig into it. But again, if you read something you don't understand, that you can literally put the word commentary behind the verse, and it's lists of people talking about what's there.
Yeah, that's crazy. What tools do you use? So like, for an example, different translations, the what you just said by commentary afterwards, the strong concordance. Is it concordance or coordinates? Concordance. Okay. That was confusing to me.
It's close enough.
Anyway, tools. Is there any other tools that you use for
I like
podcasts or
listening to people talk. Like when I'm driving or if I'm doing my own stuff. And actually, to be honest, like it's frustrating for me to try to preach a sermon when I haven't had that time to just sort of take in information. And I don't even mean take in information that teaches me what I think. Sometimes it's information that causes me to just think. And the sermons where I've had alone time with my headphones on to dig through those YouTube videos, podcasts, books. I love listening to the thoughts of people that are so anti-Bible because how'd they get there? And it's always fear related. There's always some level of fear. And so that to me is like a trigger of like, that's why I love it. Okay. I'm not advocating for the show. Don't go watch it. It's horrible. But Vikings, their culture was, if you do something bad to us, we'll do something even worse to you. And then if this culture is the same way, what was so interesting to me is like, that's why forgiveness is so valuable. It's got to stop somewhere.
Right. Because if it just keeps flopping, I mean.
And when you kill 2 of their guys, you don't feel better. They just feel wronged. And it's never ending. It's a spiral that never ends. And if you're not willing to invest in the culture of the word, literacy of the word, then you don't understand the practical. It's not a set of rules. Why would God, think of this, why would God just throw us out in a swimming pool and go, if you can swim back, I'll let you out? What would that tell you about the nature of God?
Yeah.
He says, in the midst of me expanding into choice, because someday we're going to reconsider the concept of choice and go, Oh my gosh, it's huge. Because it says the angels are intrigued with us. They're intrigued with salvation and grace and mercy and these things that we talk about. They just can't get enough of it because they're like, what is this? It's choice. And that God expands into this concept of choice, and yet he lives it out with us. And it's not a set of rules. It's relational and it's kingdom expansion. And when you start thinking of the terms of that, then God doesn't become this judge. He becomes more of a father. But it's all practical. All the rules have a practical foundation that says your life will be better in the long run, even if it's harder in the short term. It's better in the long run according to this set of rules.
Yeah. Is there any translations you don't use?
No. But again, I mean, I like things even that I agree or disagree with. I love the Message Bible. And people are like, that's not really the Bible. That's just his evaluation of it. And I've read things in the Message, and I'm like, that's not exactly what that said. That's not exactly what that meant. I could point out a lot of errors in the Message. But to the average person who's just trying to kind of get into the pattern or the habit of reading the Bible, I would recommend the Message to literally everyone. Eugene Patterson is the one that wrote it. And it just kind of goes through the Bible. It's basically what he understands when the Bible says what it says.
Okay, cool.
I will say that's the one I've had the most like, ooh, I don't think that's exactly how that is meant. But I also know that there are people who they get that and they go, it says that? Well, then how did it say it when it was so confusing? Then they'll go back to a different interpretation. It's almost like it kind of creates an appetite.
Yeah.
Like that seems so easy to understand. So how did it say it in the original?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's all I got.
Biblical literacy, man. I'm big on it. It is the three things at the church. It is biblical literacy, and this is. I want to point people to this podcast. The second one that someday we're going to get to because this is our last podcast for a little while. Sorry, everybody. Yeah. We'll get back to it. Is the willingness to love people that we see, and I think that the church for so long has taught you how to love church people better. We're going to teach you how to be better equipped to love other church people, and it's going to include a casserole. And you're like, no, dude, no. Like, how do you just become someone who just loves the people that God puts you in contact with? Because if we can get there, we'll start making an impact for the kingdom. I mean, we become way less sterile. We start to replicate people coming into the kingdom, and we start to see movement in the kingdom. But it's got to be based in biblical literacy first, because otherwise you're spreading a version of God that's damaging.
Yeah.
Jack says this was solid. Jack, I will message you later because I'm curious about your Arizona.
But if you make casserole, Levi and I will eat it.
No onions.
What? No onions. Thank you guys for watching. Go read and become literate and have a great rest of your week. See you guys.